the world remembers in fragments. We inherit whispers of an earth that once trembled with glaciers, roared with forgotten beasts, and may have sheltered civilizations that the winds and waters erased long before our own. To walk back into that deep silence is to step outside of history and into myth, where bones in the soil speak of hunger and survival, and the stones themselves seem to guard secrets too vast for a single age to claim. Was humanity truly alone in its dawning, or did we rise upon ruins already ancient? The question hovers like the mist over an ice age sea, and it is there, between certainty and speculation, that our journey begins. Before we plunge further, a brief word. This channel thrives on curiosity, on the hunger to piece together mysteries the earth has half buried. If you find yourself drawn into these shadows of time, consider lending your presence, like, share, and subscribe, so that the echoes of forgotten ages may continue to reach those who seek them. Together, we keep the fire alive in the long night of prehistory. Before history had a name, before the first marks of ink and chisel, there was only the long silence of the world itself. Wind over stone, the endless rhythm of waves against a frozen shore, the muffled sound of snow burying valleys under its white weight. These were the only voices. Into that silence walked our earliest ancestors, fragile yet unyielding, shaped by landscapes that were both merciless and magnificent. They carried no chronicles, no monuments, no written accounts to tell us what their lives felt like. What we know of them is scattered, drawn from bones weathered by millennia, from soot-stained cave ceilings, from flint shaped by a hand that trembled in the cold. But in that silence, before memory could be written, something vast stirred. The story of us. Imagine a plain stretching to the horizon, the grasses stiff with frost, the sky stretched wide and pale above. A small band of people moves across this expanse, every step dictated by necessity. Hunger drives them, the scent of distant herds pulls them onward, and behind them, always, is the specter of scarcity. Their survival depends not on comfort, but on constant movement, a rhythm older than nations, older than kings, older even than language as we understand it. They are few, bound to one another by blood and need, their lives fragile as a flame cradled against the wind. And yet, within that fragility lies endurance, the stubborn resilience of creatures determined not only to live, but to pass life forward. A child stumbles, and a mother lifts them, whispering sounds that are half song, half instinct. We do not know the exact syllables, but we know what they meant. Care, warning, love. These proto-languages, carried in rhythm and gesture, were the first sparks of communication, words born not from luxury, but survival. Around the hearth, those syllables lengthened into story and story into meaning. Every tale told by firelight was more than entertainment. It was instruction. This is where the mammoths pass. This is where the river floods. This is the cave where spirits wait. Through such whispers, memory began to take shape, fragile as the flame itself, yet destined to outlast those who spoke it. The earth around them was alive with challenges. Wolves circled at the edge of light, their eyes gleaming like embers in the dark. The cold bit deep, gnawing at bone and marrow, relentless as time itself. Yet humanity endured by mastering fire, by striking stone against stone until sparks rose into the night. In that moment of ignition, when flame leapt into existence and shadows danced on stone walls, something irreversible began. For with fire came control over the night, warmth against the killing frost, a weapon against beasts. Fire was survival, but it was also something more. the first true mirror of human imagination, the glow in which dreams and fears alike could be spoken aloud. Archaeologists uncover charred bones, cracked open for marrow, the discarded shells of hearths where people gathered. These fragments, mute and incomplete, nevertheless testify to the constancy of need. Life was never secure. Every hunt was a gamble, every birth a risk, every crossing of a river an act of courage. And yet these fragile bands multiplied, moving from valley to valley, leaving faint trails across continents that would one day be called Africa, Asia, Europe. They did not know the names of these lands. They knew only the terrain beneath their feet, the currents of rivers, the constellations overhead. Theirs was not a world of maps, but of patterns memorized through repetition and survival. The great beasts of the Pleistocene moved beside them. Mammoths thundered across frozen plains, their tusks curving toward the sky like crescents of bone. Bison massed in herds so vast they seemed like rivers of muscle and horn. Cave lions stalked in silence, larger than their modern descendants, their golden coats blending into the grasses. For our ancestors, these creatures were both sustenance and danger, divine gifts and mortal threats. To hunt one was to risk death. To kill one was to secure life. Every spear cast was an act of courage. Every carcass dressed a triumph wrested from the indifference of nature. The relationship between human and beast was intimate, bloody, and sacred. And yet, for all their struggles, these early people left behind something more enduring than bone or ash. In the dim caves of Chauvet, of Lascaux, of Altamira, they painted. They painted with ochre and charcoal, shaping images of horses, bulls, and deer that still shimmer with life tens of thousands of years later. These were not idle decorations. They were prayers, invocations, affirmations that the world could be captured and perhaps influenced. To paint a bison on the wall was to ensure the hunt, to connect with forces larger than oneself. And in those paintings, humanity's silence gave way to voice, not written yet, not spoken as we know it, but inscribed in pigment and shadow. These were the first messages that spoke across time, from one mind to another, separated by millennia, but still understood. Yet even with art and fire and story, the silence persisted. For every site preserved, countless others were erased, washed away by floods, ground down by glaciers, swallowed by shifting earth. What we find is only fragments, a thin scattering of clues across an ocean of absence. The true scope of their lives, what they feared at dawn, what they dreamed at night, the songs they might have sung, is lost to us, perhaps forever. And it is in that loss that the haunting beauty of prehistory resides. The silence before memory is not empty. It is heavy with absence, an echo of lives that shaped us without leaving words. The very landscapes they crossed remind us of impermanence. Ice advanced and retreated, sculpting valleys, swallowing forests, grinding mountains into dust. Rivers shifted their courses, carving new paths across the earth. Sea levels rose and fell, exposing lands now drowned beneath waves. Our ancestors walked across territories that no longer exist, plains that are now seabeds, forests buried under deserts. Each migration was both an ending and a beginning, each departure a step into uncertainty. And yet, they pressed on, carrying with them nothing but tools, fire, and each other. At night, they must have looked upward, toward the same stars that still scatter across our skies. What did they see? Constellations are human inventions, but the lights themselves were always there, cold, distant, eternal. Perhaps they wove myths from their shimmer, stories of hunters and beasts written across the heavens. Perhaps they saw in them a reflection of the fires around which they gathered. Whatever meaning they found, those stars offered one thing above all: continuity. In a world of shifting ice and vanishing herds, the stars remained. They were the first calendar, the first map, the first suggestion that time stretched beyond the span of a single life. The silence before memory was not empty. It was pregnant with becoming. In every cracked bone, in every soot stain, in every handprint on a cave wall, we glimpse not only survival, but imagination awakening. These people did not yet know agriculture, cities, or writing, but within them was already the seed of all these things. They carried the fire forward, step by step, through hunger and cold, through terror and wonder, until silence itself began to fracture into history. And yet, even as we reconstruct their world, we must acknowledge what we do not know. The silence is deeper than our tools can reach. For every site uncovered, there are thousands lost. For every bone preserved, countless others turned to dust. Our knowledge is a constellation of fragments scattered across an immense void. To peer into that void is to feel awe and humility in equal measure. We are heirs to lives we can scarcely imagine, built upon sacrifices we cannot tally, carried forward on stories we cannot hear. And so the silence before memory endures, not as emptiness, but as a presence that surrounds us, reminding us that our own voices, too, may one day fall silent, leaving only echoes for others to find. The fire did more than hold back the night. It became the axis around which the human world slowly began to turn. To imagine life without it is to imagine a darkness without reprieve, a world where every rustle in the shadows was a predator's breath, where the cold gnawed at the marrow without mercy. But with fire, humanity carved a sanctuary. The hearth became more than survival. It was a gathering place, a circle of light in which something entirely new began to emerge: memory. It was there, in the wavering glow of flame, that language stretched its first sinews, story was born, and the fragile architecture of culture took root. Picture a cave on a winter's night. The wind shrieks outside, carrying shards of ice across the frozen plain. Within, a cluster of figures huddles close, their faces lit by the shifting glow. The fire cracks, sending sparks into the blackness above, shadows dancing against the stone walls in distorted forms that mimic beasts and spirits. A child watches wide-eyed as an elder begins to speak. The words are not yet words as we know them. They are gestures, tones, sounds patterned with rhythm and cadence, more song than speech. But the meaning is unmistakable. The elder tells of a hunt, of a river crossing, of a warning remembered. The child listens, and in that listening, the fragile bridge between generations is built. The hearth becomes the first classroom, the first theater, the first sacred stage. Around these fires, the boundaries of the individual dissolved into the collective. Food was shared, tasks divided, responsibilities held in common. A successful hunt was not only a matter of sustenance, but of celebration. The meat roasted over the flames was more than nourishment. It was a reminder of unity. Each bite affirmed that survival was a collective triumph. In this sharing, the idea of us began to eclipse the loneliness of I. The hearth transformed necessity into belonging, and belonging into culture. A lone fire could warm a body, but a shared fire warmed a soul. Burials from this age tell us something profound. Graves adorned with beads of carved bone, with ochre-stained soil, with the tools and ornaments of daily life suggest that these people did not see death as mere absence. They saw it as a passage, a continuity. To place a necklace of shells beside the dead was to affirm that even in silence, identity mattered. Such practices hint at belief, at ritual, at the first flickers of religion. Around the hearth, death was spoken of in murmurs and chants, softened by story. The ancestors were never entirely gone. They lingered in firelight, present in memory, shaping the living through unseen hands. In this way, culture did not merely preserve life, it preserved meaning. It is in the caves of Chauvet, Altamira, and Lascaux that we see the hearth's legacy inscribed most clearly. The paintings that cover their walls were not idle diversions. They were ritual acts, born of the same firelight that flickered across the walls where people gathered. Imagine the scene. Torches illuminating surfaces that seemed to move with the dancing flame. Lines etched into stone that transformed shadows into living herds. Horses gallop, bison charge, deer leap across the curves of rock, animated by the light itself. To paint was to summon was to hope, and to hope was to endure. The hearth fire was extended onto the walls, becoming an eternal flame, an act of defiance against the silence of the world. These gatherings also gave rise to something more subtle, yet equally transformative: trust. In the dark plains, predators prowled. To close one's eyes and sleep was to invite danger. But within a circle, guarded by fire, each person's vulnerability was shielded by another's watch. Such trust was fragile, hard-earned, and yet it deepened with every shared night. From trust emerged cooperation. From cooperation came planning. And from planning came strategy. The hearth was thus not only a source of warmth, but the crucible in which the earliest forms of society were forged. Without it, humanity might never have grown beyond scattered bands wandering without cohesion. As language evolved, the hearth became the archive of oral tradition. Knowledge was preserved not in marks on clay or ink on parchment, but in the minds of those who listened. Each retelling was an act of preservation and reinvention, keeping wisdom alive through rhythm and cadence. Stories were layered with memory and myth, the warning of the treacherous river disguised in the tale of a spirit that drowned wanderers, the location of fertile hunting grounds preserved in the song of a great stag that returned each season. Through story, memory expanded beyond the individual. A child who never crossed a certain valley would still know its dangers. A hunter who never saw a certain beast would still learn its habits. Story wove the group together, and the hearth was the loom. We must also imagine the quieter moments. After the meat was eaten, after the chants and laughter died down, there would have been silence broken only by the crackling of wood. Eyes stared into the flames, thoughts drifted toward questions too large to answer. What lies beyond the mountains? Why do the stars wheel across the sky? Why does death take the young as it does the old? In those silences, the hearth nurtured not only survival, but wonder. Wonder is a luxury in the midst of hunger, but it is also a necessity. It is wonder that pushed humanity to paint, to sing, to question, and ultimately to seek more than existence. Around the fire, wonder was given shape, allowed to breathe, and shared. The hearth's role was not confined to caves. In open plains, in river valleys, in forests, wherever a fire was kindled, the same transformation occurred. The flames tethered groups to places, however briefly, creating centers from which journeys radiated outward. Each fire left behind a scar of ash, a trace of gathering, a mark of presence. These traces are fragile but significant. They tell us that community, even in its earliest form, was anchored to firelight. Humanity's path was never solitary. it was always bound. There was a time when the earth trembled with the footsteps of titans. To step outside one's shelter, to walk across the open plains of the Pleistocene, was to enter a world where human beings were small against a backdrop of enormous life. Mammoths with tusks like crescents of ivory carved the horizon as they moved in solemn herds. Woolly rhinoceroses, armored in thick hide, grazed along river valleys, their horns curved like the scythes of forgotten gods. Enormous ground sloths pulled down branches with clawed arms, while cave bears, vast as shadows, prowled the mouths of dark caverns. The air itself must have carried a heaviness, a sense of presence, as though the earth had not yet relinquished its command to beasts of such size. Our ancestors lived among these creatures, and their relationship with them was complex, woven from awe, fear, and necessity. To hunt such an animal was to risk everything. A charging bison could break a hunter's bones in an instant, and the strike of a mammoth's tusk could crush entire groups. And yet, the reward was immense. One mammoth could feed a tribe for weeks, clothe them in warmth, and provide bones for tools and shelter. The choice to hurl a spear against such titans was not made lightly. It was a gamble played against hunger, cold, and time itself. When the kill was successful, it was not only sustenance, it was survival made manifest, a triumph inscribed in memory and retold in firelight. But the giants did not endure. In a span of a few thousand years, a blink in the scale of geological time, these towering presences vanished. One after another, they disappeared from the landscapes they had dominated for ages. The mammoth herds dwindled, the cave lions grew scarce, the woolly rhinoceros left only bones behind. It was as though an entire orchestra of voices that had long thundered across the plains had suddenly fallen silent, leaving humanity alone in an emptier world. The causes of this great vanishing remain an enigma, a question that still haunts scientists, archaeologists, and storytellers alike. Some argue that climate was the executioner. As the Ice Age drew to its close, glaciers retreated, rivers swelled, and ecosystems shifted in ways that stripped these giants of their homes. Grasslands became forests, plains grew wetter, and the delicate balance upon which large animals depended began to collapse. For creatures so vast, even small changes could have meant the difference between survival and extinction. Others suggest that the true force behind the silence was human. The hunters who once admired the power of the mammoth also learned to exploit it. With sharpened flint, fire-hardened spears, and an unrelenting will, they drove these creatures into death traps, ambushed them at rivers, or harried them until exhaustion brought them down. Even in small numbers, humans carried an advantage no beast could match: cooperation, strategy, the ability to imagine not only the moment, but the outcome. One tribe against one mammoth was impossible. 10 tribes against a herd, united by signals, fire, and persistence, could achieve the unthinkable. In this theory, the giants fell not to climate, but to the relentless ingenuity of the small. And yet some believe it was both, the climate shifting beneath their feet and humanity pressing in upon their flanks, that together extinguished them. A fragile balance tipped by two forces, each one survivable alone, but catastrophic when entwined. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. A world emptied of its titans, a silence settling over plains where once the earth shook. What must it have been like for those who lived through this transition? Imagine a child born into a world where mammoths still roamed, where their shadows fell long across the snow. By the time that child grew old, perhaps the herds had dwindled, sightings rare, their tusks spoken of as relics from another time. Stories of them would have lingered, tales of beasts so great they seemed immortal. To watch them vanish was to witness not only the loss of food and resources, but the fading of a presence that defined the horizon itself. For those early humans, extinction was not an abstract idea. It was a lived experience, an empty plain where once there had been thunder. In some places, remnants lingered. On Wrangel Island in the Arctic, mammoths survived until just a few thousand years ago, isolated from the world that had turned against them. Imagine an island where the last of these giants still walked, their tusks gleaming in the polar light, their cries carried on the cold wind long after their kin had vanished elsewhere. To us, they are prehistory. To the people who might have encountered them, they were ghosts that refused to fade. The disappearance of these giants shaped not only ecosystems, but the human mind. When the mammoths fell silent, the balance of the world shifted. No longer did humanity walk beneath the shadow of beings so much larger than themselves. No longer did the hunt mean pitting frailty against overwhelming strength. Instead, the earth became more human-shaped, more open, more vulnerable. And with that emptiness came opportunity. Without competition from such enormous beasts, human populations grew. Agriculture emerged in lands once trampled by herds. Settlements expanded in valleys where predators no longer prowled. The vanishing of giants carved a path for civilization, though at the cost of mystery. And yet, something of them lingered in memory. Myths speak of enormous creatures, half remembered in story long after they had vanished in flesh. Legends of great serpents, of thunderous beasts, of monsters buried in ice. These may be echoes of encounters passed down through generations, tales born of fear and awe. Even today, the bones of mammoths found in frozen soil inspire wonder, their tusks curving like crescent moons across museum halls. We gaze upon them not only as scientific specimens, but as reminders of a time when humanity was not the only force that commanded the earth. The extinction of the giants is more than a mystery of the past. It is a mirror, showing us our place in the larger story of life. For if such vast and powerful creatures could fall, what does that say of us? We imagine ourselves immortal, yet we too live in ecosystems fragile as spun glass. Just as the mammoth depended on grasses that vanished, we depend on balances we scarcely understand. Their silence is a warning, an echo carried across millennia, whispering that no dominance is eternal. Perhaps that is why their absence feels so heavy, even now. To look upon the empty plains of prehistory is to sense what was lost, not only in flesh and bone, but in the very texture of existence. The vanishing giants remind us that the world has been remade before, that landscapes have shifted, that life itself has faltered and renewed. They remind us, too, that memory is fragile, that without words, without records, whole epochs can vanish almost without trace. In the end, we know the giants only through their remains, the ivory buried in frozen soil, the bones revealed by shifting rivers, the paintings on cave walls that capture their likeness more vividly than words ever could. They are gone, but not entirely. They live in our imagination, in the weight of myth, in the echo of thunder that we sense when we close our eyes and imagine walking where they once walked. And perhaps that is the final truth of their silence, that extinction does not erase completely. It leaves shadows, it leaves questions, it leaves the haunting beauty of what once was, and the reminder that we are only one species among many, carried by time, destined one day to vanish as they did. The world after the giants was a quieter place. Yet in that quiet, humanity found new paths. Paths that would lead toward settlements, toward monuments, toward civilizations built not in the shadow of mammoths, but in the company of one another. The silence they left behind was not empty. It was a space in which humanity grew, a void filled by memory, story, and the restless drive to endure. Long after the mammoths had faded from the earth and the last ice sheets began their slow retreat, a new kind of silence settled over humanity. It was not the silence of empty plains or vanished beasts, but the silence of memory breaking apart, of stories slipping into shadows. From that silence emerged whispers, legends of lands drowned by the sea, of civilizations erased not by the passage of time, but by sudden catastrophe. Across cultures, across continents, voices rose in harmony with the same haunting refrain. Once there was a place, a people, a world that thrived before ours, and it is gone. Of all these echoes, none has carried further than Atlantis. The word itself rings with mystery, conjuring images of marble cities gleaming beneath the sun, of harbors crowded with ships, of temples rising toward the sky. The story first reaches us through Plato, the philosopher who wrote of an island power beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a place vast and mighty that fell in a single night of fire and flood. Was he recounting a memory, repeating an old tale handed down through generations? Or was Atlantis a parable, a symbolic warning wrapped in allegory? The truth has been debated for millennia, yet the effect remains the same. Atlantis haunts our imagination like a dream half remembered, but Plato's story is not alone. In the East, Tamil traditions speak of Kumari Kandam, a great landmass swallowed by the Indian Ocean. In the Pacific, Polynesian myths recall lands that sank beneath the waves, leaving only scattered islands as survivors. In the Americas, the Maya tell of floods that swept away the world of the first people. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh describes a deluge that remade the earth, while the Hebrew Bible preserves a similar tale of Noah and the Ark. Even in Northern Europe, stories linger of lands once walked by ancestors now drowned under the sea. Taken together, these fragments suggest something deeper than invention, as though human memory itself still trembles from the weight of waters that once rose higher than anyone could imagine. The Younger Dryas, a sudden cold snap nearly 13,000 years ago, may hold the key to these echoes. Geologists find signs of abrupt climate shifts, of seas rising, of floods that reshaped entire continents. To live in those days was to inhabit a world unstable, where a single generation could witness rivers carving new valleys, shorelines advancing inland, fertile plains becoming salt marsh. For the people who survived, such upheavals would not have been abstract events, but lived trauma. The loss of a homeland, the drowning of a valley, the destruction of all that was known would carve itself into story, and story into myth. When words are scarce, when writing does not exist, memory becomes legend to ensure it endures. Yet the persistence of these tales raises another question. Were they only the memories of natural catastrophe, or do they hint at something greater? Some scholars, some dreamers, suggest that these myths of drowned lands may preserve faint traces of civilizations older than we know. At Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, archaeologists uncovered massive stone pillars carved and arranged over 11,000 years ago, before pottery, before agriculture had taken firm root. The site suggests planning, ritual, organization beyond what was once thought possible for hunter-gatherers. If such a place could exist, then might there have been others, now lost beneath rising seas, Could Atlantis, Kumari Kandam, or their countless counterparts be echoes not of allegory, but of real communities, real cultures erased from sight? Skepticism is vital. Many dismiss these tales as coincidence, as humanity's universal fascination with water, with creation, with destruction. Flood myths, they argue, arise wherever rivers swell and seas encroach. And yet, the universality itself is striking. Why should cultures separated by oceans, cultures with no contact, speak of the same event, the great deluge that took everything? Perhaps this speaks to our shared vulnerability, to the reality that every community lives at the mercy of waters. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it is the residue of an actual calamity, remembered not in data or artifacts, but in the rhythm of story. To consider this possibility is to step into the twilight between archaeology and myth. We walk among ruins whose builders are unknown, whose purposes remain obscure, and wonder whether they were survivors, fragments of something greater. The great stones of Baalbek, the submerged ruins off the coast of Japan, the strange alignments hidden beneath Central American jungles. Each site fuels speculation, not because answers are clear, but because the silence surrounding them invites imagination. If a civilization had risen before ours, even briefly, how would we know? Would its remains have survived the floods, the ice, the grinding weight of time? Or would they be erased so completely that only the faintest shadows linger in legend? For those who once sat at the edge of a shoreline and watched the sea consume their world, the experience must have felt like the end of all things. Imagine a valley where your ancestors lived for generations, where hearths burned and children grew, swallowed by waves that crept closer each season. Imagine the helplessness as rivers swelled, as storms came fiercer, as the land shrank beneath your feet. To leave was not only to lose a home, but to abandon memory itself, to step away from graves, from sacred sites, from the bones of your people. To survive was to carry the story, to tell children that once, long ago, there was another place, a place now drowned. And so the echoes spread, not as history, but as myth, embroidered, reshaped, passed across centuries until they became the tales we know today. Atlantis, then, is more than a lost city. It is the symbol of everything that can vanish: knowledge, power, beauty, certainty. It is the reminder that even greatness can be swept away in a single night. To read Plato's account is to feel the weight of human hubris, the fragility of order, the suddenness with which nature can reclaim its own. And yet, it is also to feel hope, for if Atlantis is only story, it proves how enduring story itself can be. A tale told 2,000 years ago still shapes imagination, still inspires quests, still compels us to peer into the deep, searching for marble columns where only coral grows. Perhaps that is the truest echo of Atlantis, not the certainty of its existence, but the persistence of its possibility. We are haunted by the idea that the past may hold more than we know, that beneath the waves lie answers to questions we have not yet dared to ask. In this haunting lies both caution and wonder. The drowned lands remind us of our fragility, but also of the vastness of time, of the possibility that the earth has seen more than we can imagine. Every myth is both a memory and a mirror, reflecting not only what may have been, but what we fear, what we long for, what we cannot forget. The giants of the earth vanished, leaving silence in their wake. In that silence, myth filled the void, carrying whispers of drowned cities, of civilizations lost. To move from the vanishing beasts to the echoes of Atlantis is to follow the thread of loss itself. a thread that weaves extinction and memory into one tapestry. The giants remind us of fragility. Atlantis reminds us of impermanence. Together, they draw us deeper into the question that underlies all of prehistory: how much has been forgotten, and how much waits just beyond our reach in the silence of the earth. Stone does not breathe, does not move, does not remember in the way flesh does. And yet, across the earth, stone rises where it should not, arranged in patterns so deliberate, so immense, that it seems to hold memory itself. Long after the mammoths fell silent and the floods gave rise to myths of drowned worlds, humanity began to leave behind monuments that defy the passage of time. They stand even now, weathered and broken, yet still defiant. Vast circles, looming pillars, slabs carved with symbols, stones aligned with the movement of the stars. These are the voices of the forgotten builders, voices that speak not in words, but in weight, shadow, and endurance. Nowhere is this more haunting than at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, where, over 11,000 years ago, human hands shaped towering T-shaped pillars and adorned them with carvings of animals, both real and symbolic. The site was built at a time when agriculture had barely begun, when most people still lived by the chase, by gathering wild plants, by moving with the seasons. And yet, here they raised a temple. The scale is staggering. Some stones weigh more than 16 tons, quarried, dragged, and lifted without metal, without wheels, without beasts of burden. The carvings show foxes, vultures, snakes, and abstract patterns whose meaning eludes us. This was not shelter. It was not survival. It was something else. A place where ritual and memory converged, a monument to a world already ancient. Göbekli Tepe rewrites the order of things. For centuries, scholars believed that agriculture came first, civilization second, monuments last. Yet this site suggests the reverse, that people gathered to build, to worship, to remember, and only afterward did the seeds of farming follow. It is as if the human impulse to shape stone, to leave something permanent, came before the cultivation of fields, as though memory itself demanded walls before bread. Who were these builders, and what compelled them to carve their world into permanence? The silence offers no answer, only the stones themselves, standing in solemn witness to an age before history. And Göbekli Tepe is not alone. Across the globe, megaliths rise from the earth like questions turned into architecture. In the British Isles, stone circles dot the landscape, their alignments tracing solstices and equinoxes with uncanny precision. In Malta, massive temples rise from limestone, older than the pyramids of Egypt, their chambers shaped to echo with ritual sound. In the jungles of South America, terraces and walls stretch across mountainsides, stones fitted so perfectly that even blades cannot slip between them. In each case, the question persists: how did people with such limited tools achieve such feats, and why? The simplest answer is that they were not as limited as we imagine. Human ingenuity has always outpaced the tools at hand. With ropes, levers, patience, and sheer determination, small groups could move mountains. Experiments today prove that even a handful of people can raise massive stones by clever use of balance and counterweight. Yet knowing that it can be done does not dissolve the wonder. The true mystery is not only the method, but the purpose. Why did people who lived precariously, dependent on uncertain harvests or hunts, devote such colossal effort to monuments that provided no food, no shelter, no protection from cold? The answer may lie in memory. To build in stone is to defy forgetting. Wood rots, flesh fades, fire consumes, but stone endures. To shape stone is to carve permanence into a world otherwise fluid, unstable, fleeting. These monuments may have been calendars, temples, communal gathering places, but more than that, they were anchors against silence, physical declarations that memory would not be erased. In an age when flood and famine could obliterate whole valleys, stone stood as resistance against impermanence. Perhaps, too, they were mirrors of the sky. Many alignments suggest that megaliths were not only rooted in the earth, but pointed toward the heavens. Stones aligned with solstices, with lunar cycles, with the slow turning of constellations across the night. To stand among them was to stand within a map that joined heaven and earth, body and cosmos, human and divine. The builders may have seen themselves as participants in a vast dialogue with the universe, their monuments both observatories and prayers. In this sense, every stone was not only weight, but word. Every circle, not only geometry, but myth. And yet, for all their grandeur, the builders themselves have vanished. We do not know their names. We do not know their languages. We cannot hear their songs. What remains are their stones, mute, implacable, outlasting empires, outlasting even the memory of why they were raised. Civilizations rose and fell around them. Generations lived and died in their shadow. Yet still they stand, challenging us to imagine lives we cannot see. Some whisper that these sites are more than human, that they are remnants of forgotten civilizations older than we admit, fragments of Atlantis or some unnamed world erased by time. Such speculation cannot be proven, but it cannot be dismissed entirely either, for the stones themselves resist certainty. They force us to confront the possibility that our neat timelines may be incomplete, that human history may be longer, stranger, richer than we allow. Archaeology demands caution, evidence, discipline, but imagination too has its place, and the stones leave us space to wonder. For those who walked among them millennia ago, these monuments must have seemed eternal. A child born beside a stone circle would grow to adulthood beneath the same pillars, then die with those same stones still standing. They were constants in a world of flux, guardians of memory that stretched beyond the span of a single life. To live in their shadow was to feel connected not only to ancestors, but to eternity itself. Perhaps that is why, even now, we feel drawn to them. To stand before a megalith is to feel small, yet not diminished, to sense that we too are part of something older, vaster, and more enduring than ourselves. Time, of course, has not been kind. Many stones lie toppled, their carvings worn smooth by rain, their alignments broken by shifting earth. Some sites are buried, others forgotten, others misused by conquerors who saw only quarries for their own ambitions. And yet enough remain that their voices still carry, faint but insistent, across millennia. To gaze upon them is to stand at the edge of two silences, the silence of the builders we cannot know, and the silence of our own future, when perhaps we too will be remembered only by fragments left behind. The forgotten builders left us more than ruins. They left us questions. In their stones we glimpse the first human attempts to carve memory into permanence, to bridge the gap between earth and sky, to resist the erosion of time. They remind us that even in ages we call primitive, the human heart was already reaching toward meaning, already shaping story into structure. They remind us that the impulse to endure, to leave something behind, is as old as fire, as old as the chase, as old as the silence itself. And so we walk among their ruins with reverence, hearing in every shadow the echo of hands that once shaped stone, the breath of lives that once lifted slabs heavier than hope. We call them forgotten, yet they are not gone, for their monuments still speak. They do not tell us everything, but they tell us enough. That humanity has always struggled against silence, always fought to be remembered, always sought to bind itself to the eternal. And in that struggle, we are not so different from them. The drowned lands whispered of fragility. The stones speak of defiance. Together, they remind us that prehistory was not only survival, but creation. Not only endurance, but imagination. What else might lie hidden beneath forests, deserts, seas, waiting to be uncovered, waiting to break the silence? The forgotten builders teach us that the past is not lost. It is sleeping, and sometimes it awakens in stone. Every age leaves its imprint on the earth, though most fade until little remains but silence. Yet across cultures and continents, stories persist of others who came before, of peoples and beings whose presence haunts the edges of human memory. They appear in myth as gods, as teachers, as ancestors who brought fire, law, or knowledge from afar. They rise in legend as builders of impossible structures, as strangers who vanished when the world remade itself, as survivors of calamities no one could wholly describe. We call them shadow civilizations, not because we know them, but because we do not, because they linger only as silhouettes against the fog of time. The ancient Sumerians, among the earliest known civilizations, spoke of the Apkallu, sages from before the flood who taught humankind the skills of agriculture, writing, and architecture. The Greeks told of Prometheus, a figure who stole fire from the gods to gift humanity its first technology. The Maya remembered ancestors guided by divine teachers, while Polynesian traditions tell of navigators who arrived from lands long since drowned beneath the sea. To the Egyptians, the earliest kings were said to descend not from men, but from gods. In India, the Vedas describe cycles of ages, each ending in destruction, each reborn anew. Beneath these tales lies a common thread, the suggestion that knowledge was given, not discovered, as though humanity was not alone in shaping itself. Skeptics say this is no mystery. Myths of gods and teachers, they argue, reflect the human need to explain sudden leaps in progress, to clothe the shock of invention in the language of story. But others ask, what if these myths preserve more than imagination? What if they are faint echoes of real encounters, real transmissions of knowledge from cultures erased by time? If so, then the shadows lengthen, for it would mean that civilization itself may be less a solitary ascent than an inheritance, fragments passed down from forgotten hands. Consider again the ruins we cannot easily explain. At Baalbek in Lebanon, stones weighing hundreds of tons lie fitted in place with an accuracy beyond their apparent age. In Peru, at Sacsayhuaman, massive blocks interlock with such precision that not even a knife blade can pass between them. Off the coast of Yonaguni in Japan, beneath the sea, lie formations that resemble steps and platforms carved by design, though geologists debate whether they are natural or not. Each site is contested. Each has explanations rooted in the ingenuity of human labor. Yet each also fuels speculation. Were these feats entirely the work of the cultures we know, or are we glimpsing fragments of something older, carried forward after catastrophe, reduced to myth and memory? If shadow civilizations did exist, they may not have been vast empires of iron and steel. They may have been fleeting, their technologies subtle, their marks fragile against the grind of ages. Civilization does not always mean cities or machines. It can mean networks of trade, systems of knowledge, symbolic languages, beliefs that unite communities across landscapes. Such things, when destroyed, leave little trace. Floods wash away archives. Fires consume wooden temples. Earthquakes erase entire valleys. What endures is stone, and even that wears down until meaning is lost. A civilization need not have disappeared without a trace. It may simply be that we no longer recognize its traces for what they are. This is the realm where archaeology ends and imagination begins, where possibility fills the void left by silence. Some hypothesize that groups of survivors carried fragments of knowledge across continents after the Younger Dryas cataclysms, seeding traditions and skills in scattered lands. Others suggest that cycles of rise and fall extend further back than we realize, that humanity's story is not a straight climb from caves to cities, but a spiral, with civilizations rising, falling, and leaving behind only myths for the next to interpret. More speculative voices stretch even further, imagining visitors not of this earth, though such claims remain less history than dream. Still, the persistence of these myths forces us to ask, why do they endure? Why does every culture seem to carry within it the memory of others who came before? The answer may be simple. Humanity itself is older and more complex than we admit. For much of our existence, different human species coexisted. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and others we have only begun to discover. Could the memory of encountering other human kinds, similar yet different, have seeded these myths of gods and teachers? To live alongside another species of human would have been uncanny. They thought, they crafted, they buried their dead, and yet they were not us. Their presence could easily have become mythologized after they vanished, remembered not as neighbors, but as shadowy predecessors. In this light, the gods of myth may not be divine, but simply other humans, preserved in memory as beings set apart. And yet, there is another possibility, more haunting still. Perhaps shadow civilizations are not merely others who came before, but ourselves, forgotten. The ruins we puzzle over, the myths we tell, may not echo visitors or gods, but human cultures that rose briefly into greatness and then fell so completely that only stories survived. A people who mastered the stars for navigation, who mapped the heavens with precision, who shaped stone with an artistry now eroded, could easily have vanished in floods, leaving behind no writing, no metal, no empire, only myths of beings wiser than men. To forget is easy. To forget entire civilizations is easier still, when the span of time is measured not in centuries but in millennia. Imagine a coastal city 12,000 years ago, bustling with trade, its people carving symbols into wood, weaving myths into ritual, navigating waters with knowledge lost to us. Then the seas rose, storms came, earth shook. Within a generation, it was gone, its story surviving only as whispers carried inland by survivors who, without writing, could preserve it only in tale and song. To their descendants, centuries later, it became a legend of a people who were more than human, who taught them arts and then vanished. To us, it appears only as a shadow, impossible to prove, yet too persistent to dismiss. Shadow civilizations haunt us because they challenge our certainty. They remind us that what we call history is only a fragment, a surface scratched upon deep stone. Beneath it lies something older, something we cannot fully touch. Archaeology demands caution, but imagination leans forward, restless, unsatisfied. In the silence between evidence and myth, we sense presences that refuse to be forgotten. They may never be proven, yet their very ambiguity ensures their survival. For as long as humans ask questions, as long as we walk among ruins and wonder, the shadow civilizations will endure. Perhaps that is their true existence, not in stone or artifact, but in us. They live in our need to believe the past is deeper than we know, in our longing to connect with something greater, older, wiser than ourselves. They are the embodiment of mystery, of the knowledge that time erases but never wholly consumes. Whether they were real or imagined, whether they walked in flesh or only in dream, they remain part of the human story, written in the space between what is known and what is forgotten. The forgotten builders showed us the power of stone to defy silence. The shadow civilizations remind us that even stone cannot hold everything. Some truths slip away, leaving only echoes that unsettle us, compel us, draw us deeper into the labyrinth of time. As we move forward, we carry their silhouettes with us, shadows that stretch not backward alone, but forward as well, whispering that we too may one day be remembered only in fragments, only in myth, only as shadows of what once was. Around 12,800 years ago, the earth may have trembled beneath fire that came not from its own depths, but from the heavens above. For generations, archaeologists and geologists believed the younger Dryas, the sudden cold snap that plunged the planet back into near glacial conditions, was driven only by gradual shifts in climate. Yet a growing chorus of voices suggests something more violent: a cosmic visitor, a fragment of comet or asteroid, tearing through the sky and remaking the world in flame. If true, then early humanity did not merely endure the shifting moods of ice and thaw, they survived apocalypse. Picture it. The night sky burns with streaks of fire, fragments of ice and stone hurtling toward the earth. Explosions ripple across continents as fragments strike, setting forests ablaze, turning rivers to boiling torrents, darkening the air with soot. Herds of animals scatter in terror, entire landscapes swallowed by wildfire. Smoke rises to the heavens, dimming the sun, altering rainfall, plunging temperatures back into the grip of ice. For those who lived then, there was no science to explain it. There was only terror, only the conviction that the sky itself had turned against them. Evidence for such an event lies in strange layers of earth known as the black mats, thin bands of soot and charcoal found across North America and beyond, dating precisely to the onset of the younger Dryas. Within these layers are nanodiamonds, tiny crystals forged under extremes of heat and pressure, and magnetic spherules that suggest cosmic impact. Some archaeologists see in this a smoking gun, proof that fragments of a massive comet shattered in the atmosphere, raining destruction upon the earth. Others argue the evidence is ambiguous, that fire can come from many sources, that coincidence is not catastrophe. Yet the possibility lingers, sharp as a blade, that the human story nearly ended in a single night of fire. For the people who lived through it, whether comet or climate alone, the effect was the same. Temperatures plummeted, ice advanced once more. Crops that had only just begun to be cultivated failed. Rivers froze, herds dwindled, extinctions accelerated. The megafauna, the mammoth, the mastodon, the giant sloth, were among the casualties, their disappearance linked in part to this sudden shock. Humanity, still fragile, still scattered in small bands, faced starvation, migration, and collapse. And yet, remarkably, they endured. If the comet struck, then we are all descendants of survivors who saw the sky fall and lived to remember. Memory of such an event would not remain in scientific terms. It would not be recorded as data, for writing had not yet come. Instead, it would lodge itself in story, in myth, in whispered warning. And so across cultures we find tales of fire from the sky, of gods hurling thunderbolts, of floods that followed flame, of darkness that swallowed the sun. The Hopi speak of worlds destroyed before ours, one by fire, another by flood. The Greeks tell of Phaethon, who lost control of the sun chariot and set the earth ablaze. In Hindu tradition, firestorms mark the end of cycles, cleansing before renewal. These myths, scattered across continents, may not be inventions alone. They may be the scarred memories of ancestors who truly saw fire fall from the heavens. To imagine their fear is to strip away the distance of millennia. One night, stars steady in their patterns, fires burning in their hearths, people lay down to sleep. The next, the sky is torn by fire, beasts stampede, forests erupt in flame, ash falls like snow, days darken, crops wither, rivers clog with death. What language could describe it? What memory could hold it? Only story, only myth. And so perhaps the comet still burns in us, not in stone or fossil, but in the terror embedded deep in cultural memory, resurfacing in tales that warn of fire and judgment. The Younger Dryas lasted more than a millennium. It was not a single night of catastrophe, but an age of hardship, triggered by that event or not, where cold tightened its grip again. Yet even in this darkness, humanity adapted. In the Near East, people who once wandered began to settle, to cultivate grains resilient to cold. The Natufians, among the first to experiment with farming, endured by shaping the first villages, small clusters of huts bound together by shared labor and food. Out of disaster, new strategies were born, as though survival itself demanded innovation. But the shadow of catastrophe remained. Did the survivors tell their children of the fire that had nearly ended them? Did they look upward with fear, seeing not constellations but reminders of what once fell? The night sky may have been transformed from a map of wonder into a warning, a place of gods who could unleash destruction without mercy. Perhaps this is why ancient peoples so often built their myths upon the heavens, seeing in the stars both the origin of life and the threat of its end. Modern science may one day settle the debate. Was the Younger Dryas triggered by a comet impact, or was it merely the convulsion of ice and water as glaciers collapsed? Either way, the human experience was the same: survival at the edge of annihilation. Yet the allure of the comet hypothesis is not only in its evidence, but in its resonance. It gives shape to the myths. It bridges the silence. It suggests that what our ancestors remembered in story may have been real. To believe in the comet is to admit that memory can survive 10,000 years, not as data, but as myth, not as measurement, but as warning. And the warning is not ancient alone. The earth is not immune to the sky. Fragments of rock and ice still wander above us, remnants of creation, some large enough to end civilizations in an instant. We call them near-Earth objects, track them with telescopes, send probes to measure their paths. We have science now, but the truth is unchanged. The heavens hold the power to erase us, as they may have erased others before. The comet and the dark sky are not merely prehistory. They are possibility, reminders of fragility we prefer to ignore. For those early humans, the catastrophe was not the end. They endured, rebuilt, carried memory forward in song and myth. For us, their endurance is a lesson, that survival is not guaranteed, that knowledge can be washed away, that silence can return at any moment. The comet may have come and gone, but its shadow stretches into the present, a whisper across millennia that the sky is never entirely safe. And so, when we look at the stars, we inherit two visions: the wonder of light scattered across eternity, and the dread of fire that can fall without warning. To live between those visions is to be human. It is to carry both awe and fear, both imagination and memory, both the dream of immortality and the knowledge of fragility. The comet burned, the sky darkened, and still humanity walked forward into the silence, carrying with them not only survival, but story. And perhaps it is in that story, more than in the stones or bones, that the true endurance lies. The sea is vast, not only in distance, but in memory. It holds within it entire landscapes swallowed by the slow, relentless rise of water, valleys and plains that once rang with footsteps and voices, but are now silent beneath waves. To imagine prehistory without acknowledging the ocean's hunger is to miss half the story, for much of what humanity once built and inhabited is no longer on land at all. It lies drowned, preserved in fragments of wood and stone, waiting in the deep silence of the ocean's tombs. When the last ice age ended, glaciers that had locked up water for millennia melted and the seas began to climb. Over the span of only a few thousand years, an instant in geological terms, but a lifetime in human memory, coastlines changed beyond recognition. Entire continents were reshaped. Islands vanished. Plains that had supported herds and people alike were drowned. The world our ancestors walked was larger, richer, more connected than our maps now show, and much of it lies hidden beneath the surface. In northern Europe, there once stretched a vast lowland connecting Britain to the continent. Today we call it Doggerland, a name given by archaeologists piecing together its story from dredged bones, tools, and peat pulled from the North Sea. 12,000 years ago, it was a fertile plain, with rivers winding through forests and marshes, home to deer, aurochs, and the people who hunted them. Families lit fires there, told stories in the dusk, raised children who never knew they lived in a land destined for drowning. As the seas rose, their valleys filled, their forests became swamps, their hearths were swallowed. By around 8,000 years ago, the waves had consumed nearly all, leaving only scattered islands before those too disappeared. Beneath the waters of the North Sea lies not only a drowned landscape, but a drowned memory, a homeland erased so completely that it survived only in myth until rediscovered by science. The same fate touched other corners of the earth. Off the coast of India, beneath the waters of the Gulf of Kambat, sonar surveys reveal structures that resemble walls and foundations, though their origins are debated. In Southeast Asia, the region now called Sundaland once linked the islands of Indonesia to the Asian mainland in a vast expanse of land that supported human migration, trade, and settlement. When the seas rose, it fractured into the archipelagos we know today. In the Americas, the coastal plains of Florida and the Yucatan were broader, dotted with springs and caves now submerged. Each of these drowned lands could have held villages, camps, perhaps even monuments, yet what remains is hidden beneath layers of silt and coral, guarded by currents and salt. For the people who witnessed it, the rising sea was not abstract. It was relentless. A village built one generation would find its shore closer the next, its fields soggy, its river flooding with salt. Families would abandon their homes, carrying what they could, telling children stories of the place where they had once lived. Over time, these stories hardened into myth, of golden lands swallowed by water, of gods angry with humanity, of floods that punished the proud. Myths of deluge do not come from nowhere. They come from memory made sacred, from trauma turned into story, from landscapes transformed too quickly to be ignored. And still, hints of the drowned remain. Fishermen pull up bones of mammoths, tools chipped from flint, remnants of forests now lying on seabeds. Off the coast of the Bahamas, divers find formations that some believe to be ancient walls. In Japan, the Yonaguni Monument rises from the seafloor in terraces and steps, its lines so sharp that debate rages over whether it is natural or carved by human hands. Each discovery fuels speculation. How much history lies drowned? How many stories remain locked away beneath the salt and pressure of the sea? Archaeology struggles with this silence, for the ocean erases more ruthlessly than time on land. Wood decays, fabrics dissolve, bones scatter. What remains are stones, and even they grow soft beneath the weight of currents. To seek prehistory beneath the waves is to sift through fragments, to wrestle with ambiguity. Yet the scale of what has been lost is undeniable. Nearly 10 million square miles of land have been submerged since the peak of the last ice age. Imagine the civilizations, however small or great, that may have lived there. Imagine the rituals performed, the myths told, the innovations born, now erased, existing only as shadows. And yet, perhaps they live on in the stories we tell. Plato's Atlantis, the Tamil Kumari Kandam, the Maori accounts of swallowed lands, the biblical flood. All may carry echoes of these drowned places. When elders told their children of lands lost to the sea, they were not merely speaking of allegory. They were preserving memory, passing it forward in the only vessel that could withstand the tides: story. In this sense, the ocean's tombs are not entirely silent. They speak through myth, through fragments, through the yearning we feel when we gaze out at the horizon and imagine what lies beneath. The ocean is both destroyer and preserver. Beneath its depths, shipwrecks remain intact for centuries, cargoes preserved in salt dark silence. Who is to say entire settlements, drowned quickly, might not survive in some form, waiting for us to find them? Already, divers exploring submerged caves in Mexico have uncovered the remains of early humans, bones so well preserved they still hold DNA. Such discoveries remind us that the ocean does not erase everything. It hides, it conceals, it guards. One day, perhaps, more of its secrets will rise to light. For now, we walk coastlines that were once mountains, sail above plains that were once walked by hunters, swim over forests that once trembled with wind. The ocean's tombs remind us of the impermanence of place, of the fragility of home. They remind us that the landscapes we inhabit are not eternal, that shorelines move, that the earth itself is restless. They remind us that civilization is not only built upon soil, but upon memory. And when soil is lost, memory must become story, or it vanishes. To stand on a cliff and watch the sea is to see not only water, but history. Beneath the waves lie the hearths of families, the graves of ancestors, the stones of builders we will never know. To gaze into the horizon is to gaze into the silence of a world erased. And yet, in that silence lies a strange comfort. For if so much has been lost, and yet we still endure, then perhaps endurance itself is the truest legacy of humanity. The ocean may bury, but it cannot wholly forget. Its tombs may be vast, but its whispers still reach us, carried in myth, in fragments, in the questions that refuse to die. The comet and the dark sky showed us how fragile survival can be when fire falls from the heavens. The ocean's tombs remind us how fragile it is, even when the danger rises quietly, day by day, until the land itself is gone. Together, they speak of impermanence, of the vastness of forces that shape our story. And together, they lead us toward the deepest mystery of all, the cosmic mirror, where humanity begins to see itself not only in the earth and sea, but in the stars above. The sea buries, but the sky reveals. When the earth turned hostile with ice and flood, our ancestors still had the night above them, unchanging, eternal, patient. Long before temples rose or cities gleamed, before writing etched memory into clay, the stars offered the first library, the first scripture, the first map. Across continents, people lifted their eyes to that endless canopy and saw not silence, but story. What they found there was more than beauty. It was reflection. In the stars, they saw themselves. Constellations are among humanity's oldest acts of imagination, a way to connect the scattered lights into meaning. Hunters, gods, beasts, rivers, and heroes. Our earliest ancestors sketched their myths across the firmament, embedding their struggles and triumphs into eternity. The Greeks told of Orion, the mighty hunter forever chasing the Pleiades. In Egypt, the god Osiris was mirrored in Orion as well, while the goddess Isis shone as Sirius, her rising marking the flood of the Nile. The Navajo traced the patterns of their sacred stories in the stars, as did the Polynesians, who turned the night sky into a compass that carried them across the Pacific's vast distances. Each culture read the heavens differently, but all agreed on one thing. The sky was not empty. It was alive with meaning, and perhaps more than meaning. Myths of visitors descending from the stars ripple across traditions. In Mesoamerica, the gods are said to have come down on beams of light. In Dogon cosmology of West Africa, there are stories of teachers who came from Sirius, carrying wisdom in the form of fire. In ancient Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki are remembered as beings who descended to shape the destiny of humankind. Were these simply metaphors for forces of nature, for the incomprehensible vastness of the cosmos? Or do they preserve echoes of encounters we can no longer trace, memories of something extraordinary once witnessed? Even if the stories are allegory, their persistence speaks of longing. To gaze at the stars is to feel both awe and humility. They are older than mountains, older than oceans, older than the bones of the earth itself, and yet they shine upon us still, as they did upon the first humans who wondered at their light. That continuity forged a sense of kinship. If the stars endure beyond flood and fire, then perhaps we too might endure. If the heavens stretch into eternity, then perhaps our lives are not as fleeting as they feel. The stars became not only navigation and calendar, but comfort, a reminder of permanence in a world that gave so little of it. At times, this comfort deepened into obsession. Many ancient structures, Stonehenge, the pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Chichen Itza, are aligned with the heavens, their stones echoing the movements of solstices, equinoxes, and stars. The builders raised their monuments not only for ritual or memory, but as mirrors of the sky, embedding cosmic order into earthly form. To walk through these places is to step into a union of heaven and earth, architecture that binds human community to celestial rhythm. Here, the cosmic mirror shines most clearly, the belief that to reflect the sky on earth was to draw down its permanence, to inscribe eternity into stone. But the mirror reflects more than permanence. It reflects fragility. Myths of cosmic destruction abound as much as myths of cosmic guidance. Meteors become omens, comets harbingers of doom, eclipses signs of divine wrath. The sky was a source of knowledge, but also of fear, a reminder that power beyond human control could arrive at any moment. The comet that may have triggered the Younger Dryas left a scar not only on the land, but on the imagination, teaching humanity to see the heavens as both gift and threat. To live beneath the stars was to live beneath both wonder and dread. Perhaps that is why so many myths speak of cycles, of worlds destroyed and remade, of suns that die and are reborn, of ages that end in fire or flood and begin anew in light. The Vedic yugas, the Mayan calendar, the Hopi prophecies, all envision time not as a straight line but as a circle, echoing the eternal cycles of the sky itself. In this vision, we are not unique. We are one age among many, destined to vanish as others have, remembered or forgotten, mirrored in the heavens as sparks that flare and fade. And yet, within that cycle lies a deeper mystery. The human need to see the cosmos not only as vast but as intimate, not only as eternal but as personal. When early people spoke of gods descending from the stars, they may not have been describing literal beings from beyond. They may have been describing the way the cosmos itself feels alive, the way its immensity presses upon human consciousness. To say the gods came from the heavens is to acknowledge that the heavens themselves change us, that to gaze at them is to feel touched by something beyond ourselves. The cosmic mirror is not only out there, it is within. Science has given us new language for this awe. We know now that the elements in our bones, the carbon in our breath, the iron in our blood, were forged in stars long dead. We are, in a literal sense, children of the cosmos, fragments of stars that lived and died billions of years before the earth was born. When ancient myths spoke of descent from the heavens, they may have been closer to truth than they knew. The cosmic mirror reflects not only our stories projected onto the stars, but the stars themselves reflected in us. We carry their light in our very bodies. This knowledge deepens the silence of prehistory. For if humanity has always looked upward, then perhaps myths of cosmic origins and cosmic teachers are not fantasy alone, but the oldest form of truth-telling. They are not wrong. They are incomplete, framed in story instead of data. They capture what science later confirmed, that our fate is bound to the stars, that we are part of a cycle far larger than Earth alone. The cosmic mirror shows us not only who we thought we were, but who we truly are. Still, the questions remain. Did early peoples witness phenomena we cannot now reconstruct? Supernovae blazing bright enough to rival the moon, meteor showers that set the sky aflame, auroras painted across unfamiliar latitudes. Did such spectacles seed their myths of gods and visitors, their stories of fire descending from heaven? Perhaps. The night sky then was darker, clearer, deeper than ours, unpolluted by artificial light. Every star was sharper, every movement more visible, every mystery more immediate. To live beneath such a sky was to live beneath revelation. And so, in the cosmic mirror, humanity found both its fears and its aspirations. The heavens became a place of warning and hope, of memory and myth, of cycles and continuity. They told our ancestors that they were small, but they also told them that they were part of something infinite. They reminded them of mortality, but also of immortality, for the stars endure, and in their endurance we find a reflection of our own longing to last. The ocean's tombs taught us that memory can drown. The cosmic mirror teaches us that memory can endure, written not in soil or stone, but in the light of stars that outlast empires. And as humanity gazed upward, they began to sense a truth too vast for words, that we are not only of the earth, not only creatures of dust and bone, but of the cosmos itself. The stars are our mirror, and in their reflection we see not only what we have been, but what we might yet become. Would you like me to continue into Chapter X? The Long Tomorrow, 1,200 words. The closing chapter that gathers survival, myth, and cosmic reflection into a meditation on humanity's future. Here is Chapter X, 1200 words, the closing chapter that gathers together survival, myth, and cosmic reflection into a meditation on humanity's fragile future. Chapter X, The Long Tomorrow, 1200 words. The story of humanity is not written only in stone, nor only in myth, nor only in the stars. It is written in the fragile persistence of life itself, in the thread carried forward across millennia from the silence before memory to the vast questions of today. Our ancestors endured hunger and flood, fire and ice, extinction and exile. They told stories of drowned lands and vanished beasts, of gods descending from the sky and worlds destroyed by flame. They raised stones to defy forgetting, carved symbols into caves, carried memory in song. And now we, inheritors of their endurance, find ourselves at a threshold, for the same forces that shaped their world, climate, catastrophe, time, and chance, still surround us. The question that lingers is whether we will listen to their echoes, or whether we too will vanish into silence. The long tomorrow begins with awareness of fragility. Civilizations feel eternal in the moment, yet every ruin whispers otherwise. The Sumerians believed their cities would last forever. So did the Maya, the Egyptians, the Romans. Each built monuments of stone and clay, inscriptions meant to endure beyond death, and each, in its own time, fell. Sometimes to war, sometimes to famine, sometimes to the slow grind of ecological collapse. To walk among their ruins is to hear the same truth. Permanence is an illusion. What is strong becomes fragile. What is certain becomes dust. And yet, fragility is not defeat. Our ancestors did not endure because they were invulnerable. They endured because they adapted. They moved when rivers shifted, hunted new herds when the old ones vanished, learned to plant seeds when gathering was no longer enough. They did not control the earth. They listened to it, fought with it, yielded to it, reshaped themselves in its rhythm. In that adaptation lay their survival. If the comet burned, they lived through its darkness. If the seas rose, they fled to higher ground. If the beasts vanished, they found new ways to eat, new ways to live. The long tomorrow belongs not to the unchanging, but to the resilient. Today, we stand in a paradox. Never before has humanity held such power, the ability to bend rivers, to split the atom, to peer into galaxies millions of light years away. And never before has that power come with such risk. The climate shifts again, seas rise once more, forests burn with growing fury. We are not immune to the same forces that humbled our ancestors. We are bound to them still. The difference is that we can see further, measure more precisely, predict what they could only sense in fear. The challenge is whether we will act with the wisdom their silence urges, or whether we will trust too much in our illusions of permanence. The myths of old civilizations teach us more than history. They teach us humility. When Plato wrote of Atlantis, he was not simply describing a drowned city, but warning of hubris, of a people who grew too proud, too powerful, and were struck down in a single night. When flood stories echo across cultures, they remind us of nature's power to cleanse, to reset, to erase. When myths of gods descending from the stars appear, they may be memories of awe, of phenomena beyond explanation, but they may also be reminders that humanity has always needed guidance, has always searched for wisdom beyond itself. These stories are not only about the past, they are about us. For what will we leave behind? When the long tomorrow becomes the long yesterday, when future eyes look back upon our ruins, what will they see? Will they find only fragments of plastic buried in soil, steel corroded, satellites broken and tumbling in the void? Will they find stories preserved in languages they cannot decipher, myths of our own making half-remembered, stripped of meaning? Or will they find something more enduring? A sense that we too reached for permanence, that we too sought to shape memory into stone, into stars, into echoes that could outlast silence. The long tomorrow is not guaranteed. It is fragile as the flame cradled by our ancestors against the wind. And yet, fragility has always been enough. One fire becomes many. One voice becomes song. One act of survival becomes story that carries across thousands of years. If we endure, it will not be because we were mighty, but because we remembered how to listen. Listen to the earth, to the sky, to the whispers of those who came before. Perhaps that is the truest inheritance of prehistory, not monuments or myths, but perspective. To gaze back into the silence before memory is to understand how thin the thread of existence is, how easily it can fray, and how remarkable it is that it has held. We are here because they endured, and those who come after, if they come at all, will be here because we endured. The long tomorrow is not destiny. It is responsibility. And so we look again at the stars, at the cosmic mirror that has always reflected our fragility and our longing. The same stars that watched the mammoths fall, the same stars that shone on drowned Doggerland, the same stars painted in ancient caves. They remind us that we are both small and immense, fleeting and eternal, fragile and resilient. They remind us that silence waits, but so does endurance. They remind us that tomorrow is long, but only if we carry it forward. The story of prehistory is unfinished, for we are still writing it. Every discovery of bone or stone, every excavation of a drowned plain, every new myth unearthed, adds to the chorus of voices that whisper across time. We are not the first civilization to imagine itself immortal, but perhaps we can be the first to learn humility from those who were not. The long tomorrow is not about conquest, nor about permanence, but about continuity, the passing of fire through the night, the survival of story against the silence, the recognition that we are threads in a tapestry larger than ourselves, and in that recognition lies hope. For if we can see ourselves in the shadow of vanished civilizations, if we can listen to the silence of drowned lands and vanished beasts, if we can accept that even stone erodes and myths fade, then perhaps we can live not in arrogance, but in reverence. Perhaps we can shape a tomorrow that will not be erased so easily, a tomorrow that carries not only our triumphs, but our humility, our awe, our memory of the vastness from which we came. The long tomorrow is fragile, but it is also alive. It is written not in certainty, but in resilience, not in permanence, but in story, not in stone alone, but in the stars. We walk forward carrying silence and memory alike, heirs to the endurance of those who came before, guardians of a fire that must not go out. And when, someday, others look back at us, perhaps they will see not only ruins, but echoes of a people who knew they were fragile, yet endured, who knew they would one day be forgotten, yet sought to remember, who gazed at the long tomorrow and walked into it with both fear and wonder.